excited to start just doing some meetings where we can come together and gain some knowledge about different learning differences and pray together, and I'm excited for the ways God's going to speak through that. So, and Beth is a specialist with TAP learning. She tutors my kids in dyslexia, and she's going to be sharing this morning, just so I look at things and I still don't grasp dyslexia because it looks different with each kid. So I'm excited for her to share and for us to learn some more, and then we'll pray together.
Just to let you know, I do know dyslexia, and I have one child of my own who has never been officially diagnosed because he's older now, and I wish I had known what y'all are learning now when he was younger, because I could have helped him so much better. All right, what is dyslexia? You'll read the definitions and they say it's a language-based learning difference. It's a difference in the way the brain processes information. It is not a difficulty with vision, so typically vision therapy does not help a whole lot. Vision therapy can be good for difficulties with your eyes, but that is not where the difficulty lies with dyslexia. So there are 4 components of language. There's listening, there's speaking, there's reading, and there's writing. So dyslexia affects the way your child hears language, the way your child speaks, the way your child reads, and the way that your child writes. It has far-reaching implications. So in a very young child, they may talk later than most other children. They may have difficulty pronouncing words. You know, we all see those funny ones like Busgetti or, lawnmower from lawnmower. They may be unable to recall the right word. That one persists. That one lasts pretty much your whole life as a dyslexic. They have difficulty with rhyming. They have difficulty learning the alphabet, the numbers, the days of the week, the months of the year. You notice all those things are sequential. So they have difficulty with that. And they may have difficulty following multi-step directions. Never use that as your sole diagnosis of dyslexia, because I've never met a child or an adult who did not have difficulty following multi-step directions. All right, so then they get to school age. What does it look like? With reading, they're slow to learn the connection between letters and sounds. They have difficulty reading words in isolation. If you just show them a single word, they have a lot of problems with that. They may confuse small words like at, they may say to. Said and I see that all the time, kids confusing said and, does and goes. They make consistent reading and spelling errors. Okay, so we all know this one. The B and the D.
Yes.
Reversals, a small number of reversals are normal in kindergartners and first graders. They need to drop out. And so you're really looking at the number of reversals you're seeing, as well as if they persist past first grade. But B and D is a very common reversal. Another one I see a fair amount is P and Q. They also like to reverse words, which is called mirror writing. And this is probably the one we see the most. Was and so on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the word, and last week I was tutoring a child, and I asked her to write a little word on our chalkboard, and it was beautifully done. She's saying the letters in the right order, but it's total mirror writing, okay? So your child is not being bad when they do that, it's just the way their brain is working. Okay, inversions. These are less common, but you do see them, M and W. If you flip them over, they're the same, N and U. And this one I'm starting to see more. This is odd to me, that I've been tutoring for 10 years, and some of these I see a lot in 1 year, and some I'll go several years without seeing. But right now, I'm seeing a lot of this one, that inversion. Then words like, you see this more with older kids, they reverse one letter. So the word is felt, and they write this. They just flip flop that F and the L. Okay, you'll see that a fair amount. And then sometimes when they're reading, they confuse words like house and home. Or just words that are similar, but they're not quite right. They read slower, and if your child is dyslexic, they're gonna read slower their whole life, okay? In math, they transpose numbers. 25 becomes 52. They confuse arithmetic signs. In their little minds, the plus and the minus look the same. They have trouble learning and remembering math facts. They have trouble learning to tell time, and of course they have trouble with word problems. That's why I'm a little reluctant when a child has pretty significant dyslexia to say they also have dyscalculia, which is a math difficulty, because a lot of times these kids are actually very good with the math concepts. It's the dyslexia that's interfering with these aspects that makes it look like, oh, they have problems with math. I like with those to address more of the dyslexia components, and usually that straightens out the problem, more than a true dyscalculia where they don't really understand numbers. Writing, this is probably one of the most common things I see when parents come to me with children who are older. They'll bring me a sample of their writing and they'll go, they spelled there 4 different ways on this same page. Or they spelled the word soldier, that's a really hard word to spell, and they spell it a lot at Intown. Soldier, and it's spelled 5 different ways on this page. That's just the dyslexia. And they have difficulty organizing writing, and this is something that we all need to work on with dyslexics, is teaching them that systematic way of how to write, how to go from a sentence to a paragraph to an essay. Okay, dyslexia is lifelong. It can be remediated, but it cannot be cured. Even your adult dyslexics are going to show some signs of it. Dyslexia is hereditary. If you are a parent with dyslexia, your sons have a 75% chance of being dyslexic. Your daughters have a 25%. They don't quite know why there's that gender difference. Dyslexia ranges from mild to profound, and it looks different in different people. That makes it very confusing. It often occurs with other learning differences. You'll hear this term or see the term comorbidity. That just means it occurs with other ones. By far the most common one it occurs with is ADHD. But you also see it with dysgraphia, and you also see it with slow processing. Now, sometimes people will say dyslexia is a language processing disorder. It is a language processing, but it doesn't mean they're also a slow processor. A slow processor means everything moves very slowly through their brain. Okay, so you've got this diagnosis. If you went and got a diagnosis of strep throat, they'd give you an antibiotic and everything would be hunky-dory. You get a diagnosis of dyslexia, you're not going to get a magic pill. You're not going to get a magic therapy. They're going to tell you the treatment is educational. And it's currently the best treatment available is the Orton-Gillingham approach. And early intervention is best. Y'all are already true believers. I don't have to give my whole speech on why it's better to do intervention early rather than later. I will tell you, remediation is, you're looking at 2 years. At least.
Thank you, at least.
At least 2 years. I mean, much more often it's 3 or 4. I have parents, and in fact, a parent emailed me yesterday. She said in her email, I want just some techniques and strategies that'll fix this. You're not getting that. There's just no way. So, you're in for the long haul, but if you can just be patient and go with the flow on this one. I have seen children who are profoundly dyslexic make huge strides and do really, really well down the road. Okay, so don't get discouraged. There is hope. The other side, you see such great things, and these kids often have wonderful study skills and wonderful approaches to learning. they'll truly be lifelong learners because they have learned how to learn early on. So really, it's more for their self-esteem because they don't struggle. It doesn't sound like he struggled a whole lot academically yet. And so it hasn't had a huge impact on his self-esteem. Whereas these kids with moderate to severe dyslexic, they are struggling by kindergarten. And so if they struggle for 4 or 5 years before they get help, their self-esteem is taken. But what is Orton-Gillingham approach? You hear that all the time. What is it? It was developed by Dr. Samuel Orton. It's a little strange when you read his writing. And Anna Gillingham in the early to mid 1900s. It's based on a scientific research of best reading practices. So now it's, as they continue to work with the Orton-Gillingham approach, they're looking at what is the brain research showing about how the brain reads. The most interesting thing to me is your brain does not have a little reading center. Your brain was not developed to read. To read, your brain is co-opting different other aspects of it to read. So there is a pathway that your brain, the average person's brain uses to read. In dyslexics, we build the pathway for them, okay? That's why it's always a little slower, because it's not the one that the brain is designing, it's the one that we are kind of designing for the brain. Orton-Gillingham is an approach. It is not a program. Now, Wilson Reading is a program based on the Orton-Gillingham approach. Here at Intown, they use Foundations, which is the classroom version of Wilson. You might have heard of the Barton reading system. That's another one. So what is the Orton-Gillingham approach? It's when you break down the English language into its components of sounds, so syllables and meanings. You're going to break it all the way down. And you teach every skill and every concept to mastery and automaticity. Introducing them is not good enough. The child has to master it and they have to be automatic. Okay, so what are the big principles of OG? And these are really, this is why when people say, oh, I'm going to get a former first grade teacher to tutor my child. Or, oh, this person used to teach 4th grade, so they know all about this kind of stuff, so they can help my child. That's true if the person has Orton-Gillingham training. Without it, no. And Orton-Gillingham is not something you can learn how to do in a really quick class. It's just not like that, okay? And it's requires a good bit of training, really, to do it well. But anyway, what are the principles of Orton-Gillingham? It's systematic and it's sequential. Lessons follow a set plan and they build on previously taught material. That is why if your child comes to me, they come and I assess where they are so I know what skills they already know and what skills I need to start with. I will teach what a closed syllable is, and then I will teach how to read 2 closed syllable words. It's multi-sensory. So, you hear that term a lot. What does that mean? It means you're going to use visual, auditory, tactile, and kinesthetic techniques simultaneously. And I thought I would show y'all kind of a universal OG technique that we use with trick words. Some people call them sight words, some people call them learned words. So let's say we do the word said. All my kids have decks of index cards with their trick words on them, okay? So I'm saying, oh, we're going to learn a new trick word today. We're going to learn said. So I take the index card and in red, and in fact we call them red words sometimes. I write S-A-I-D. The child is seeing it, the child is hearing it. But I haven't yet gotten into tactile and kinesthetic. So then I hand the card to the child and I'll say, okay, this is said, trace it 3 times as you say it. So they go S-A-I-D. Okay, what are they doing? They're seeing it as they write it in red. They're saying it, so that's the tactile piece. They're hearing it, that's the auditory piece. And they're writing it, that's the kinesthetic piece. They do it 3 times. Then you cover it up and you say, oh, let's try it another way. And sometimes I'll take a sheet of paper and I'll put, they like this. I'll say, okay, now write it on the bumpy. Okay, so So then they go S, A, I, D. Really emphasizing the tactile and the kinesthetic. But again, they had to say the letters as they wrote them because they have to see it, they have to hear it, and they've got to have the saying it, you know, the kinesthetic. So everything is very multi-sensory in OG because that's activating all the parts of the brain. OG is also very prescriptive. I have to make my decisions based on the specific needs of the child. For example, let's say I have a child that has a problem with the sound of Y at the beginning of words like yellow. That Y sound, Y is very tough for many kids. Okay, I will have probably 2 lessons on the initial sound of Y. Then it will go into my review deck, and I'm going to show you all a deck in a minute. They'll practice it over and over and over again. Y will show up in the words they have to read for review. Y will show up in the words they have to spell for review. Y is everywhere in that lesson for weeks until they master it. And but another child may have problems with CH, and so CH shows up over and over again. So that's how it's prescriptive. It's very diagnostic. I plan the lesson based on the child's current reading level. That's why there's no teacher manual for OG, because you have to make it very specific for the child. Yes, you're going to teach everybody closed syllables, but how you teach it and what you're focusing on is going to be different for each child. Because the word yell is a closed syllable. Okay? So I can use this one for the kid who's still struggling with the sound of Y. But so is check. It's also a closed syllable. The kids having problems with CH. This is a great one because you have 2 digraphs in this word. So we can also practice the CK rule on there too. Okay? So it's prescriptive, it's diagnostic, it's very explicit. A teacher directly teaches each concept and skills. I'm not a big fan of children reasoning things out for themselves, and I never do it in an OG lesson. Okay? I explicitly teach them. I tell them my expectations, and I tell them everything that they're going to do. You know, we are learning about CH. CH says ch. Let's practice it at the beginning of words. Let's practice it at the end of words. It's flexible. I change my lesson plan based on the student performance. And those are all wonderful things, but I got to tell you, that means I have to write every lesson for every child. So when you see how much an OG lesson costs, you might go, that's a lot of money for 45 minutes, but it's not 45 minutes of my time. It's the 45 minutes I spend with your child, and then all the time I spend planning. So those are the 2 things. Okay, so in an OG lesson, and your kids all know this if they have an OG tutor, first thing we do is we get out our cards. I use the picture cards from Wilson a good bit. You can get cards from all these different places. It's just a letter card. I do use the keyword. Typically, I have younger kids when I start this with them, so the keyword helps them. If you do it with an older kid, they don't have a keyword. So how do I do it? I show them the card. They go AR, car, R. Okay? They've already been taught that. I don't show them a card they haven't been taught. But they go AR, car, R, and we might do several. OR, horn, or. ER, her, You can tell I hear this a lot. IR, bird, UR, bird, Okay. Then we go through them, and sometimes I'll ask questions as we're going through. If I show CK, I'll say, tell me the CK rule. Or, you know, I'll say, hey, what's a digraph? That was a digraph, and they have to tell me what a digraph is. Then I take the cards, and I'll say, okay, I'm going to make the sound, and you write the sound that I say. So I might say, Oh, I picked up one for y'all. I do tell my students there are 3 ways. If I've taught all 3 ways, they've got to make all 3 ways. So then on the dry erase board, on paper, on the chalkboard, they write ER, IR, UR. They repeat the sound that I say, and then they write them, and then they tell me what letters make that sound. Okay? So I generally do 8 to 10 sounds per time. That part of it is always got to be in an OG lesson. It's your review. It keeps them fresh on those sounds. We also do a lot of phonemic awareness practice. That's blending sounds, because you put sounds together to read a word. Segmenting sounds, that's breaking them apart so that you can spell a word. We do rhyming. I don't do a whole lot of deleting of sounds because you don't need to delete sounds to read and write, but you can do that as a phonemic awareness one. Then I teach my spelling concepts and rules for meaning. And I have a great example. I have to share this. This is so exciting for me. But yesterday, the CK rule. CK is a digraph that you use at the end of words after a short vowel. Think of the word like pack and back. All right, so I teach that very early on. It's hard for a lot of kids because they want to spell back like this. Well, if we get the B right. Then we go, okay, so back is like that. And I'll say, hey, how do we make the k sound at the end of a word after a short vowel? We review that word. I'll have a little first grader. She learned all that, but of course we constantly review. And we have now started with vowel consonant E words. And I ask her to spell the word lake. She goes, lake. Okay, I can't use the CK because there's another letter coming. And I said, that's right. So what do you use if you can't use the CK? K. She could tell me how the rule applied in a word where you weren't going to see CK, which was a huge thing. So now she has generalized it enough so when she's spelling in school, she knows, hey, I don't use CK here. If you look at dyslexic spelling, if they haven't been remediated, there are a lot of CKs thrown in there in places they don't belong. All right, so it's always encouraging to me when they start generalizing it out. All right, then they always do dictation and words and sentences, and this is how you do it. You don't just call out words. You say the word, shell. They have to repeat it, shell. Then I'll say tap the word. And I'm not a stickler for tapping. Early on I make them tap, and I know if y'all have kids at Intown, they do tap, Okay, and that's a great kinesthetic tactile technique. Kids really quickly think it's babyish, so they quit doing it. But as long as I don't care if they do it on the table, a lot of them like to do it. But anyway, they'll go sh, and then I'll say, okay, write it, and then they'll go S-H-E-L-L. Now, sometimes for dyslexics, it's hard to say it and write it at the same time. So sometimes I'll let them write it, and then they'll have to go back and say S-H-E-L-L. And I'll say, great, what's the word? Shell. Okay, mark it up. They'll have to underline the diagram. Star the bonus button. Okay, then we have that list of words. They'll reread that list of words the next lesson. Let's say they do this. Then what I do? They'll say, I have all the sounds. And they're right, they do have all the sounds. And I'll say, there's a rule. And then they have to rewrite it. And I make mine rewrite the entire word.
And what is the rule?
What is the rule?
The
rule is called the floss rule. The floss
The
rule.
only phonics rule I know.
The floss rule. You double the F, the L, and the S at the end of short vowel words.
That's why it's called floss.
That's why it's called floss. Okay. They, of course, will do practice. An OG lesson will include practice with learned words, trick words, sight words, are all the same thing. Reading of decodable text. Does anyone understand what the difference between decodable text and non-decodable text? You want me to explain it?
Is it
or
like a
not?
trick word? Is like E-R-I-R-U-R, you just have to know it? Like,
And decodable text is all the words in that story are either trick words you've taught or the words contain phonics principles that you have taught them how to, so they can decode all of them.
okay.
There are not any words that they are going to encounter they don't know how to decode. Decodable text is boring, and you usually have to write your own stories, but it gives them a sense of mastery to read decodable text. Non-decodable text can have any kind of words in it. And yes, eventually they're gonna have to read that. I typically move them toward that, and in second grade is when I start letting them read more of those more difficult books. Okay, so be careful. Teachers will send home, oh, this is a nice, easy book for your child to read, and half the book is, is not appropriate for them because they haven't learned those phonics concepts. Okay, we always practice reading comprehension. That's easy. You can even do these kind of things at home. You can have them draw a picture. You can have them retell the story really short, quick way. Don't make them do a full narration. And write a response to the story. You can tell I worked at Intown when I say, don't make them do a full narration. Then we also do morphology practice. I do teach suffixes early on. They've got to be pretty advanced for me to do prefixes and root words. And then I do work on some handwriting practice, particularly B's and D's. We work on how those are formed, and writing practice. Other than writing responses to the story, I don't typically do a whole lot of writing in a OG lesson. However, with my older kids, I will do a full writing tutoring lesson where we break it down into sentences, and picking out a topic, writing supporting ideas, the whole 9 yards. I typically like to do that over a summer of tutoring because they don't have the competition of writing from school. They can focus on theirs. Okay, real quick, ways to help, and I think if y'all have got handouts, you can see down at the bottom. I can't emphasize this enough. Y'all all know this to read aloud to your child or use audiobooks, but you've got to do that for them to build vocabulary. And the major way that children of school age and beyond develop vocabulary is reading. So they will still develop vocabulary if you read aloud or if you use audiobooks. So do that with these. And y'all all have bright children. If they're here at Intown, they're bright children. You need to keep feeding that intelligence with new vocabulary. With and spoken English, and we know, the word exculpatory, but other than in impeachment trials, you don't hear that very much. And so, they're not going to be exposed to a word like that, usually, except for when they read. Okay. I will also, y'all all know this, advocate with schools and teachers. It's important to do that. You also need to teach your child how to advocate for him or herself. This is another skill you have to teach. You can't say to your child, go in and ask your teacher if you can have extended time on that test. Not going to work. You've got to, just don't even try it with kindergarten and fourth graders, okay? Just don't even try it. When they get around 4th or 5th grade, and you're the best judge of your child, say, hey, that sounds like a problem you should talk to your teacher about. Let's think of what you could say to your teacher. And in fact, Laura's daughter, I helped her, we talked about one. What was a solution we could come up with? And so you come up with a solution, you have them practice at home, and sometimes with my older kids, I have them practice in tutoring. All right, tell me what you're gonna say to the teacher, and then I will actually walk over to the school and I will stand in the doorway while your child says this to the teacher. You should stand in the doorway, don't say a word. You stand in the doorway, let them walk up to the teacher and say it. I will tell you as a former teacher, it's a whole lot harder to say no to a child when an adult is standing there. And so it's a good way. They also know you're there. You're there, you've got their back in kind of a literal sense and a figurative sense. Then, so the first few times do that. You're going to practice at home, you're going to go with them, and then let them do it. You maybe still practice at home, but let them do it themselves. I wouldn't expect them to be good at self-advocacy before middle or high school, realistically high school. But you need to practice it before they get to high school. And I will tell you, there's not a high school teacher alive who's going to let you stand in the door while your child says it's a practice. Okay, use your technology. Oh, in the 10 years I've been doing this, the technology has exploded. Y'all got so many great tools. Please, please, please use audiobooks, use speech-to-text software, use spell check. Okay, last thing I'm going to talk about real quick is reading with your child. this often becomes fraught for the parents of dyslexics. Earlier in the day is better. Bedtime should be you reading to them. Reading is very hard work for dyslexics. Even after they're remediated, they are using up a tremendous amount of brain energy to do this. Don't wait till they're tired. So do it early in the day. You need to be calm. And encourage them to be calm. If somebody gets stressed, either you or them, stop. You do not want any negative energy around reading. And then you can alternate reading pages, paragraphs, or even sentences. And I'll let my kids pick. I'll put a story in front of them, and I'll say, hey, you want to alternate sentences, or you want to alternate paragraphs, you want to alternate pages? And I'll let them have that level of control. Obviously, by the time they're in 5th and 6th grade, do not alternate sentences. Try to go with paragraphs, at least at that point in time. But definitely with the younger ones. It gives them a chance to rest and recuperate in between. Have them decode only words with phonics concepts that they've been taught. So if you see a word with OO in it and you have a 1st grader, they haven't been taught that, okay? Any kind of vowel team like AI, AY, they haven't been taught that yet. So you just give it to them. Just say, oh, that's May, or that's, no big deal. Praise, 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 okay? They need all the praise you give. You cannot overpraise your child in this area. And tell them names, irregular words, names. Names they do not follow phonics rules very often. My name does, but most people's do not. And so just give them the name up front before you start reading the story. Oh, this story is about, Ken and Erica, whatever. Keep the sessions short. Reading is very hard work for dyslexics. Parents like to say, oh, we read for 45 minutes last night, and I am just cringing inside when they say that. If you read for 45 minutes, that's great. But if they read for 45 minutes, I'm surprised they're not just unable to come to school the next day. They're so exhausted, So really, remember, it's hard work for them. Keep it pretty short. Okay.
So what do we do?
5 minutes by themselves and 15 minutes of you reading to them, or 15 minutes of an audio.
It just is 20 minutes total, so you've got the option of doing audiobooks,
Yeah.
you reading aloud.
And they do say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so 5 minutes in 1st grade, depending on how much they're remediated, maybe 10 by 2nd grade. 2nd grade's kind of iffy, because some of them still need to be at the 5, some of them can go to 10. As long as you're alternate reading, you can probably get away with 10. And I know they're telling them to read all this stuff. Just read it out loud to them, Sometimes they'll say, oh, I'm going to read this, Miss Mars. And I'll say, okay. And, I'm seeing them at 3 o'clock. They're tired, and they start. And I can tell where, the quality's just going downhill. And I'll just read it. I do, when I tutor dyslexics with math, in math, I read everything on the page to them because I care about the math. I don't care about them reading the word.
And you write the words. Like for Maggie, you'll write any sort of word.
A lot of times I will write. I'm thinking the whole time I'm teaching them, again, this is the flexibility. What is my goal in this? Okay? Is my goal for them to understand how to make change, or is it to write the word apple? Because they bought an apple. My goal is to, on this page, is to help them understand how to make change. Where their reading level is. And a good OG tutor should be able to tell you what your child's current reading level is. And is it grade level? If it's grade level, even though it's slower, they can read it themselves with extended time.
Okay.
And if you're dyslexic, you should have extended time on all standardized tests for the rest of your life. Okay, that's just should be the way it goes. And I will tell you, colleges and universities do a lot better with this than most other schools. They have no problem. Once your child says, here's my testing saying I'm dyslexic, they have a special building you go to and take your test. Yeah, and 3rd grade might be a little young.
Okay, so wait, don't worry about it yet.
Don't worry about it yet.
Okay.
I think I'd look at 2nd half of 4th grade, maybe on a word problem, having them start saying, if it says more than, what do you have them highlight that, or how many times, so that keywords like that, that'll help them determine the operation they should use. And that's gonna be a slow process, but if you just maybe have them do that on their homework day.
Okay.
And you can make a little chart of keywords they should, on a math page, they should highlight.
Gotcha.
To help them. And I let them highlight signs always. I start that as early as first grade. Highlight all, do you want to highlight all the pluses or do you want to highlight all the minuses? And then they go through and highlight all the pluses, okay? Or they highlight all the times. Usually division, they never miss that, other than sometimes they think it's subtraction. And I will say, a lot of math pages are written so poorly. And sometimes I'm looking at them and what sign do they want here? So yeah. Any other questions?
The ER sounds, is this just like, it's gonna be one of these three and then it's just memorization to know if bird is IR or UR?
There are 2 rules that'll help you, or 2, not rules, but 2. ER is by far the most common.
Okay.
These 2 only occur in the middle of words. This one will occur at the end of a 2-syllable word, like summer, winter. So if it's in the 2nd syllable and you hear that at the end of a word, they're gonna use ER. Now, that's not totally true, because like doctor has an OR, but we're assuming we haven't gotten to the OR and AR doing. Our control vowels are a pain, they're major pain. I do for a long time, if they get to, I give them a word that has one of those in there, like let's say I'll do an easy one, bird. And I ask them to spell it. I teach them that if they're not sure, I'll say, well, what are the 3 ways? And they'll name them, and I'll say, this one's IR. I'll just tell them, but they have to name the 3 ways to me before. They have to show me that they understand what are the possibilities that could go there, and then I'll tell them which one. But again, the reading with you, where they're seeing the text, is helpful. Or if you do an audiobook and they follow along, that's helpful. Don't always make them follow along, because sometimes tracking is pretty tedious. Anybody? Okay.
Ask quickly, do you know of a good class you can take as a mom, like not the whole battery of learning the entire OG method, but just that gives you like a rundown of the rules almost? Because
yes, okay. They're for the rules themselves, and there are a number of rules. There is a phonics class that Brenda Fitzgerald teaches with Georgia ETA, okay? And you can go to Georgia ETA online, and it's a 4-day class. You go 8 to 3, but she teaches most of the rules.
What's the skink one? I missed the one for January, but there's one in March. I forget the word that they use.
Subscriber. Now, subscriber really introduces you more to what dyslexia is and what the OG approach is, okay? And they purposely say, you are not gonna teach all the rules. You might introduce a few of them in the subscriber class, because they've had a problem, the academy's had a problem with people going, I took the subscriber class, I can tutor your child. And yeah, they don't really do a lot. But the subscriber class is very good.
And what was the woman's name?
For Georgia ETA is Brenda Fitzgerald.
ETA or what?
Yeah, Georgia ETA, Georgia Educational Training Agency. What I would do when I look at is, I look through, and if there are words they've misspelled that I know we've taught the concepts, or know that, those are words he should know, like sight words he should know, then I usually say, hey, and they're not gonna catch them. They can't catch them. You'll have to circle it and say, do you remember how this one's spelled? Or remember the rule. Like sometimes, if it's a floss rule word, let's say, this is where it helps to know the rules. But if the floss rule word, and they spell stuff, S-T-U-F, you can say, hey, that's a floss rule word. And they'll right away correct it. Those would be the only words I would have them correct. The rest of them, I would just, sometimes I'll say, I'm gonna tell you how to spell it, or sometimes I just go through and correct it for the ones I know they don't know, and I just correct it. Yes, and that's a standard accommodation. If your child has a diagnosis, is spelling is not counted off on tests or somewhere where they can't get anyone to correct it. Now, if it's the final draft of a paper and they can have someone else edit it, then they do have to
And they
have,
do.
hey, he's dyslexic, and he's got a diagnosis, and he's got a map, say, I want this accommodation, and they're pretty reasonable about this one, is not counted off on tests, or on, like, let's say they tell them they've got to write a narration, it's not counted off on that, but a final draft is. And this is a good practice for them to get into, because when they go to college and they have a big paper, they're still gonna be expected to either get somebody else to edit it, or go to the writing center and have them edit. They just may as well learn it. I'm gonna have somebody edit, so you choose your spouse based on their ability to edit.